Anyway, I would like to introduce our speaker. This time we have with us Jill Robinson from Hong Kong. She has been a pioneer of animal welfare in Asia since 1985. Widely recognized as the world's leading expert on the bear bile industry, Jill founded Animals Asia in 1998, devoted to ending the practice of bear bile extraction and improving the welfare of animals across Asia. Jill also founded Dr. Dog in Hong Kong in 1991, the first animal therapy program in Asia. And she is a member of the IUCN SSC Bear Specialist Group, Asiatic Black Bear Expert Team. So we're really happy to have you here today, Jill, and please take it away.
Thanks, Barbara. Hello, everybody. Let me just try and get the nitty-gritty bit of sharing the screen first of all. We all know that if that doesn't work, hang on, sorry, let me just try and find slideshow, play from start. Can you all see my screen?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Terrific. Okay, let me just try and, I was going to try and collapse because I've got a sea of faces here. I can't see my own slides. Never mind. We'll get through it. That's fine. Oh, there we go. Okay, I've just collapsed you all. Okay, so thank you so much. Welcome to our, gosh, what are we? This week, we are 27 years old, Animals Asia, on the 8th of August. So welcome to this journey of 1,000 miles, and especially what we're doing in Vietnam, which I'm thrilled to be presenting to you about. And this particular presentation is, of course, as it says on the screen, a study of animal welfare, conservation and education, helping both wildlife and communities to end bear bile farming in Vietnam. Let me just, oh, of course, this, oh my gosh, now it's not toggling for the next, there we go. Okay, so I haven't got time to talk about all of our programs today, unfortunately, but I set up Animals Asia in 1998 with three main missions. The first, of course, was to end bear bile farming in China and Vietnam. The second was to end the consumption of dogs and cats, again, predominantly in China and Vietnam. And the third was to end the suffering of captive wild animals. And in fact, you might be interested to know from this slide that we actually have reached two of our founding goals as an NGO, as a non-government organization. So the first is to end bear farming in Vietnam, which I'll be talking about today, but also in China. The consumption of dogs and cats, or the sale of dogs and cats for consumption, is now illegal after the Chinese government removed dogs and cats from the livestock list of the country. And I wish I had more time to go into that. Now, you're not going to see dog and cat eating ending overnight, but the regulations are there. They're in place to be able to set up the mechanism for ultimately ending the consumption of dogs and cats. Oh gosh, this is driving me nuts. Sorry. So why am I showing you this rather naughty picture of Burt Reynolds? I'm sure some of you remember this. I think it was in the 70s. It was a front page picture of Burt Reynolds lying prone and naked on a bearskin rug. And the two things I'm showing this to you, the reasons being, the first one is that well, to get your attention. And the second is that this would never be allowed today. You know, lying prone on a bearskin rug. Welfare has really sort of escalated to the sort of position that this sort of behavior would not be tolerated. But actually, I wanted to also bring a smile to you by saying that one of our own people, one of our own staff members, said that they thought that they could adopt this pose better than Burt Reynolds. So it's my very great pleasure to introduce you to our gorgeous Hector, who is adopting the celebrity pose there. And of course, he's one of our ambassadors in Vietnam, our glorious, glorious superstar celebrity, Hector. So let me just, sorry, there's all sorts of things flashing up on my screen. I don't know if you're seeing them as well, but anyway, my journey with Animals Asia, or my journey with rescuing bears, began in 1993, when a journalist friend of mine, while I was working for the International Fund for Animal Welfare, I was doing a lot of undercover investigations in the live animal markets, in the traditional medicine markets, just, all across China, Vietnam, South Korea, the Philippines. And during that time, a journalist friend of mine called me up and said, Jill, I've just come back from one of the notorious bear bile farms in China, and I urge you to have a look at one of these places. And so my interest, of course, was piqued, and I grabbed a couple of friends. We went over from Hong Kong, where I live, over to mainland China. And we joined a group of Japanese and Taiwanese tourists, and we entered this bear bile farm. And we were shown, of course, the shop on the bear farm by the bear farm owner, because all he wanted to do was to try and encourage us to buy bear bile products. But I had background information about this farm from my journalist friend, so I knew where the basement was, where the bears themselves were being kept. We weren't allowed to see them as a tour group because it was an industrial secret. They didn't want us to, didn't want anyone to know the technicalities of bear bile extraction. But we found the stairs down to the basement, my friends and I, and we came across what I've called ever since my own living hell. There were 32 bears in cages like this, and the room was really quite dark. And as my my eyes became used to the darkness, I was hearing in the background some strange popping vocalizations. And the closer that I got to the cages, the more frantic these popping vocalizations became. And I realized that the bears were recognizing us as obviously people that were going to extract their bile. And I realized that this was my first lesson of these bears, and that was the lesson of fear. And as I was walking around, I felt something touch my shoulder, and I turned around in shock because I realized I'd got too close to one of the cages. And as I turned around, I saw this female bear with her paw through the bars of the cage. And I did something so stupid. She was reaching out, obviously, towards me. And I think she was inviting me to take her paw, but we would never, never do anything as stupid as this. We've rescued 705 bears, 708 bears since. And this is the last thing that you would do. But, I don't know. I was unbelievably naive, and I took her paw. And instead of hurting me, as she had every right to do, this bear, as you can see there, just gently squeezed my fingers, and our eyes connected. And the message clearly from that bear on that day was help. And our eyes connected just for a couple of minutes maybe. And I left that farm, I think, knowing that I would never see that bear again, but knowing that she had changed everything in my life. And I gave her a name. I gave her the name Hong, which means bear in Cantonese. And again, I left the farm knowing that something rather remarkable had happened, and knowing too that this one animal had begun the dream of the Vietnam bear rescue. So as I said, we've rescued 708 bears since, because of that one lonely bear in that bear cage. And we've had an extraordinary existence ever since. I want to go back a little bit and just talk about the species of moon bears and why they're so vulnerable across the Asia continent. So first of all, they're called Asiatic black bears or moon bears. you can see in the picture there, this is a bear called Bo, and you can see on her chest that beautiful yellow moon bear crescent, that moon-shaped crescent on her chest that, of course, reflects the crescent moon. Ursus tibetanus, their Latin name. And from the International Union of Conservation of Nature, they are classed on their Red Book as vulnerable, and indeed on CITES, the Convention on International Trade in Endangered Species, they are Appendix 1 endangered species. So their range extends across the Asia continent, across Southeast Asia, parts of Eastern Asia. Predominantly they're in Iran, India, China, Vietnam, Thailand, Taiwan, South Korea, and Japan. Their habitat is broadleafed and mixed forest, sorry, in mountainous regions. Across their range, they're living high in the mountainous regions during the summertime, and then of course they come down to the warmer climes in the winter. They are, again, as I say, highly endangered. China has the highest population and has always said for many, many decades that they think there were about 50,000 moon bears across their range. But actually, that's been now updated in the last few years, and China says that they have about 28,000. So you can see that we think bear farming is absolutely responsible for the demise of this species. In fact, the IUCN say that here you can see that the most effective conservation strategy is to curtail hunting and trade and reduce demand for bear products. And that's exactly what Animals Asia has been doing over these last nearly 3 decades now, since we've been working in China and Vietnam. So to reduce hunting and pressure on wild bears, it's important, of course, to stop the illegal bear bile trade. And that, again, is what we've been doing over these years. On the right-hand side of the screen, you can see our bear called Jonathan, a gorgeous male bear. But if you look at his front left paw, you can see there that he's missing that whole paw as a result of being illegally trapped in the wild for the bear bile industry. So it's really important that this is a multifaceted program that we run. It's very holistic, running across many, many different components. And it's also important, of course, to bring in community engagement and education on the alternatives to bear bile that exist in order that we can see demand reduction and finally end bear bile farming in Vietnam. So I want to talk to you a little bit about, those of you that are curious, what exactly is bear bile farming? Well, for thousands of years, bears in the wild were hunted down and killed for their whole gallbladder, which was said to be a liquid bag of gold containing bile juice. And bear bile works. I need to say this, from the outset, that I'll talk a little bit about later why, but it contains something called ursodeoxycholic acid, or UDCA, which traditional medicine doctors in Asia have known for centuries absolutely worked. And just because so many thousands of bears were being caught in the wild and killed, the governments of several countries realized this was not a sustainable industry. And so, believably, it was the government of North Korea that actually invented something called bear bile farming, where they figured that you keep a bear in a tiny wire cage, keep it alive, and surgically mutilate the bears and extract their bile for use in traditional medicine. And today, well over 12,000 bears are being farmed across China, Vietnam, South Korea, Myanmar, and Laos. Although I have to say, in South Korea, the industry is ending there. There's less than 300 bears. Laos, there's probably less than 100 bears, the same in Myanmar. China has many thousands of bears still. And Vietnam, of course, I'll be talking about today. And you can see the before and after pictures here. This was a crush cage in China with a bear called Jasper. who was trapped, incarcerated in this cage for 15 years of his life. And here on the right side, you can see Jasper at our sanctuary in China, and he went on to live for another 15 years, very happily, very healthily. And it was one of our most forgiving bears. So it was someone called Elsa Paulson who used to be in she was a bear keeper, but she was in the bear care group. Sadly, Elsa lost her life to cancer several years ago. She was an incredible woman, a very, very good friend. And what she didn't know about bears really wasn't worth knowing. But she spoke about bears having an arsenal of senses, of abilities, allowing them to thrive in challenging, complex, and dangerous environments. Elsa always spoke that bears have senses like we do, and they have senses of sight and sound and taste and touch and smell and thought and focus and balance and emotion, hunger, movement, success, and problem solving. Again, they have complex emotions just like ours. And you can, if you look at this is one of our enclosures in China, and if you look very, very, very hard, you can see some black blobs dotted all around. And this is our bears just hanging out, doing what bears do. But bears in the wild are again such a complex species. They are actually metabolic marvels. If you imagine, I mean, we all know that, bears can hibernate from anything between 2 and 7 months in their natural habitat. Now, if we tried to dumb down and and hibernate, after several weeks, we would have multiple problems. We would get muscle atrophy, we will get organs shut down, we would get osteoporosis, we will get bed sores. Even NASA are studying this incredible species of bears that's able to, again, hibernate for anything up to 7 or even 8 months at a time, and they wake up as if nothing has happened to their bodies. I wish I had more time to talk about this, but at the very least, they are called a keystone species because they till the land, they disperse seeds, they fertilize the forest, they rake it up, they poop out the seeds, of course, and more forest grows as a result of this keystone species. They're called an umbrella species as well because they hunt the weak and the sick. They scavenge things like dead carrion that they find. So they keep the forest free of disease, and they make it safer to live in for all species that live in that forest. They are also an indicator species. So a healthy bear tells us that the rivers are running with fish. They tell us that the forest is healthy. They promote biodiversity across their range. And so it's really important to allow these bears their life in their natural habitat, because protecting bear habitat protects the habitats of other species, including ours. And a world without bears would be a sorrier and more dangerous place to live. And that's why it's important, in the rather naughty words of Ricky Gervais that you can see here, it's important to let a bear, SH exclamation mark T, in the woods. Again, for the health of us, for the health of all the other animals in that forest, and for the health of the ecosystem as well. Indeed, Vin University teamed up with Free the Bears, another NGO, and all of us at Animals Asia, and this was in 2016, and we together have established that in Vietnam, bears are in trouble in the wild. Their populations have declined dramatically, and there's probably less than 100 Asiatic black bears left in the wild. And in some localities, they are functionally extinct. So in 1992, the Vietnam government began to get quite worried, about this issue, and so they brought out the fact that within the wildlife protection law, that it was now illegal to poach and keep endangered wildlife. But I'm afraid that a lack of enforcement and just turning a blind eye very quickly saw by 1999 446 bears on farms that were being surgically mutilated for their bile. So let me tell you what that meant at that time, because I was by then doing investigations on these bear farms, and I was going around to some of these facilities and joining the Vietnam government. And what they told me just shocked me and made me sick to my stomach, because what happened then was that bears would be knocked out, they would be anesthetized with the illegal drug ketamine. And then, operators would come along and they would surgically cut into the bear's abdomen. They would locate the gallbladder, and then they would extract about 100 mil of bile, and then they would sew that surgical incision up again. And the government told me that this surgery would be carried out every 3 months. And by the fourth such procedure, again by their own admission, those bears would die. So if you're doing the maths there, basically what they were saying was that bears on farms had a lifespan of about a year. What happened to those bears afterwards? Well, sometimes they would be stuffed, and they would be put out into restaurants advertising bear bile. There's this advertisement on the right-hand side says bear bile is the best. They would also have tanks, believe it or not, of wine, which would have, bear parts soaking in that wine. And I've seen tanks with baby cubs inside the tanks with bear paws and other organs. And really, people could just come into those restaurants and pour themselves a glass of bear bile wine. You can imagine the contaminants that were in that tank, how people weren't dying at the time. I will never know. Other times, the bear farms, when their bears died, they would obviously sell the parts to local wildlife restaurants. Here I innocently, in 1999, asked the restaurant owner if they sold bear parts, and he very quickly, within minutes, brought along a plate with this back foot on top of the plate that he was willing to cook up for me, which of course I declined. On the right-hand picture, you can see 2 slaughtered bear cubs with their gallbladders removed as well and served up on a plate. So the industry was very much alive and kicking at that time. But, once again, the Vietnam government realized that this was not a sustainable industry, particularly that there was no evidence of breeding on any farm across Vietnam. So we have never found any successful breeding programs at all. So what happened then? Well, another method of bile extraction was invented, of course, without killing the bear, but one that they thought was more sustainable. And this was against drugging the bears with illegal ketamine, using an ultrasound once the bear was unconscious or semi-unconscious, as they often were, to locate where the gallbladder was. And once they found on the screen the location of the gallbladder, they would get a 6-inch spinal needle and start stabbing down into the abdomen. So they could be stabbing into the kidneys, they could be stabbing into the spleen, into intestine, into the liver, you name it, until finally, when they thought that they'd reached the gallbladder, they would take out the needle from the sheath, they would lick it to ensure that they'd reach the bitter tasting bile, and then they'd put the needle back into the sheath and draw out about 100 mil of bile. Again, not surprisingly, mortality rate on these farms was high. And so we continued talking with the Vietnam government. And in the year 2000, we said, look, we've just built a sanctuary in China. you want to end the industry. You want to see, your species of Asiatic black bears not dying as a result of this horrible industry. And by the way, you can see this bear as well, also missing the front left paw as a result of being illegally caught in the wild. So he was proof positive that this of course was not a sustainable industry. And so we offered to work with the Vietnam government to build a sanctuary. And at that time, they politely declined. So from then on, the industry began to grow, and it became quite frightening. The numbers of people that were jumping on the bandwagon, making money from this new industry. And then finally in 2005, we invited again and said, just come and see our sanctuary, come and see how the bears are being cared for and what it means to the population as well, how we're bringing the community along with us and traditional medicine practitioners along with us and ending this industry. And finally, the Vietnam government came to our sanctuary. They were so impressed that they agreed that we would work together to end bear bile farming in Vietnam by beginning to build a sanctuary to put these bears, because as they said, how can we end the industry if there's nowhere to place these bears? So our sanctuary began. Since then, we've built this incredible facility for a maximum number of 200 bears. And we've been awarded the Global Federation of Animal Sanctuaries Award as well by GFAS for a sanctuary of excellence. And I want to point out here Dr. Tuan, who joined us in 2005. And, really, he began the most incredible campaign together with the Vietnam government to end bear bile farming once and for all. And it was in November 2015 that we joined together with the authorities that you can see in the top left picture there, that they announced that that we would work together to end bear farming. And it was in 2017 that we joined them in a formal press conference together with ambassadors of different embassies, including the US Embassy, that the memorandum of understanding was clear between us that bear bile farming would end. We were finally beginning to believe the Vietnam government, and no more so than in 2018, when they joined an international wildlife trade conference in London that was hosted by Prince William and also joined by government officials of 50 different countries across the world who were also concerned about the wildlife trade. And we heard Vietnam talking about their pledge and their commitment to end bear bile farming countrywide. And finally, in 2022, we had another press conference where they said not only did they want to end bear farming, but now they were positioning a date together with Animals Asia that bear bile farming would end by the year of 2026, the end of that year. And so we have that firm commitment by the end of next year that bear farming will end in Vietnam. So now, of course, it was thanks, I think, again, to building up to that point, understanding what bear bile is, how it works, and how it can be replaced. And let me say again that, as I said earlier, it does work. It contains that UDCA, or ursodeoxycholic acid, which in Asian terms is a hot medicine to treat cold related illnesses. So it's like that yin yang, where opposites attract. But in Western terms too, this UDCA was found to be an amazing substance. And in fact, from the 1950s, UDCA has been synthesized in laboratories across the world, including USA and Germany, where it's now for sale routinely. So if anyone that has chronic liver complaints, for example, they may well be taking UDCA, but it won't be from bears. It'll be the synthetic version. In China, we've now also are seeing something amazing to emerge out of the country, because they've gone one step further than UDCA. In fact, what they are producing now in China is something called biotransformed bile, which is the mirror image of bear bile, because before we had doctors saying, well, UDCA is one thing, but it actually isn't the same as bear bile. And so, believe it or not, the Chinese government and I think about 6 pharmaceutical companies have injected millions of US dollars in producing this biotransformed bile that ultimately is slated to take the place of real bear bile. So in China, we've got 63 herbs as well that take the place. We've got in Vietnam 32 herbs that are alternatives to bear bile. And in 2020, we signed a memorandum of understanding with the Vietnam community of traditional medicine doctors, over 65,000 members, believe it or not, where they promised never again to sell or prescribe bear bile. So we've really, been able to surge forward in this campaign because now the doctors are working with us, they're working with the community, they're working with schools across the country to grow the herbal alternatives to bear bile, especially in bear bile farming hotspots of the country. And also we're working now with a commercial company called Cocoon, who have now produced this amazing substance that includes many of the herbal alternatives in one bottle that now can be sold within the community as an alternative to bear bile. And more than that, we're working with them in, again, the hotspots of bear bile farming, where the local community are invited to come along for free health checks at community clinics, where doctors then if they find that the community has something that would previously be treated with bear bile, now they're prescribing this herbal alternative rubbing cream, as we call it. It means that it's a topical component that can be rubbed on their limbs for things like arthritis, chronic pain, and of course bruising as well. And now our Tuan that you can see in the right-hand picture is working with the community in the most famous traditional medicine street in Vietnam, in Hanoi, and encouraging them to sell this herbal alternative as well, because now bear farming is illegal in Vietnam. So, to sell bear bile is illegal too. So now it's good to try to encourage them to sell something as an alternative so they can still continue making money, but not from bears. And don't forget that when we work in the schools together with government officials that you can see here, many of the school kids have parents in the community that are bear bile farmers. So this is an added incentive for the farmers to give up their bears, because number one, it's illegal. And number two, their kids don't want them to farm bears again anymore because they're doing it under such dreadful, dreadful conditions that I'll talk about in a little while. And also in the community now, we're working with local authorities putting up these murals to engage local citizens as to why it's so important to protect the country's endangered species of moon bears. Our people are so incredibly important. We've got, in Vietnam, I think over 70 staff looking after our bears. It's a full-time job for our people. And now we're so excited to announce that whereas before we would bring in Western veterinary experts and bear managers, now we are really in the middle of community training with our staff on site, and even now with veterinary surgeons. So over the years, we've been training up now, I think it's 8 interns to become junior veterinary surgeons, now working their way through the ranks. And even a first in China, a vet nurse, that there's no vet nurses not in China, I said in Vietnam. There's no vet nurses in Vietnam, never has been. And now there's one called Hung, who we're training up, and hopefully more coming after her to lead the way for vet nursing in Vietnam as well. So ultimately, the goal is that our new sanctuary that we're developing now in Bac Ma, our second sanctuary in Vietnam, will be entirely run by Vietnam colleagues. So this is a real sense of pride. And I just wanted to show you this short video talking about happy people means happy bears. Mm. And happy celebrities mean happy bears as well. And we are so blessed to have the most incredible celebrities. I haven't got the room on this screen to introduce all of them. But if any of you know Downton Abbey, we also have the amazing Leslie Nichol, who is Mrs. Patmore in Downton, is such a great friend of ours and has been out so many times to both Vietnam and China. And the wonderful actor Peter Egan. Both of them are both in the UK as our ambassadors. And this picture always makes me laugh because you can see Slash on the top right there, the guitarist in Guns N' Roses, right next to Dame Jane Goodall there. So, but if you hear, you've just heard me talking about Vietnam a lot, and you're probably not going to hear me talk too much about China because I have to say that the issue is very, very sensitive in the country. But the progress that is being made is extraordinary. And I want to thank sincerely the Chinese government for the opportunity of working in the country, especially on programs of human wildlife conflict mitigation. So, where bears are coming into farmland and destroying crops and killing livestock and even hurting people, just so they can get to food. We're working with the local authorities in Sichuan province, which helps to protect bears and people alike. And also in China, you can see there, we've got the Global Federation of Animal Sanctuaries Award there too. And already seen 418 bears rescued. So it is a terrific program. We love working with them. And, you know, next time, perhaps hopefully I can do a presentation about China as well. So I wanted to quickly talk about one really sort of figurehead program that we did run in China to help wild bears. And this was when we got a call from the Sichuan authorities in 2016 who said that they had a yearling that they found in the forest after a woman had been walking there and had been frightened witless by this young bear that had lunged at her. But then the woman had realized that this bear was being caught in a leg hold trap um, by an opportunist trapper. So we got the call from the authorities. We immediately went up into the wild of Pengzhou, the mountainous area of Sichuan. And as we were driving, there was the most beautiful rainbow in the sky. And we all said to each other, that's the name of our bear. If we can get this bear and we can rescue her, this is the name that she'll carry. When we got there, though, we were so badly shocked. As you can see, the paw in question was so badly necrotic. It was rotting away, and we realized that poor Rainbow had been trapped for several days. She hadn't eaten, she was skeletally thin. When we anesthetized her and got her back to our surgery, we found that she had maggots in her mouth, up her nose. She was fly blown, and she'd broken some of her teeth as well, cracked some of her teeth, trying to fiercely bite down onto the leg hold trap. And we realized with her paw that it was so badly damaged that it would need to be amputated. And our vet team were amazing. So what they did was that they cut the bone quite high, but they left a lot of the skin and the muscle intact so that they could kind of make a pocket so that she could weight bear on her leg once she was healed. And also while she was recovering in her cage, we had to keep human contact really to a minimum, because by now we were speaking to field biologists in the USA and also in China, and to a person they all said, let her go back into the forest, where she came from. But don't get habituated to humans. So that's what happened. We were just throwing food into the den where she was released, so that she couldn't become habituated to her human carers. The field biologists, an amazing guy called Dave Garchelis from the IUCN Bear Specialist Group, he said, look, I've seen multiple bears that have been shot by hunters in the wild. They've lost limbs, they've had their jaws broken. Bears are so stoic, they're so strong, they can recover. So I agree with all the other biologists, just let her go into the forest. So we fitted her with a GPS collar. But sadly, as we were driving up into the hillsides to let her go after she'd recovered from her amputation, we realized that the GPS collar wasn't working. So with great sadness, we had to cut the collar from her, because otherwise, as she grew, remember she's only a year old, so the collar was designed to drop off after about 3 months because she was still growing. And if it didn't drop off, obviously it would strangulate her. So we knew we had to cut the collar off, which we did. And we released her into the forest. And here you can see this little video clip of her being released into the forest without her GPS collar, without us knowing if she would ever survive in the wild. But it was just giving her the best chance that we could, in her years ahead. So here's the film. Now, we thought she would shoot out of the cage, but she didn't. She just took this cautionary look all around before she slowly began to walk out. One last look. And then what I love about this video is that you don't see her in the distance. All you see are the leaves and the trees and the twigs shaking as she went off back into her world. And I remember thinking at the time, oh my gosh, I hope that her lips are forever blackberry blue, like our lips were blackberry blue from stealing all the wild blackberries, as we released Rainbow back into the wild. So these bears, the ones that we can never release into the wild, like little Goldie here, this is a sun bear. We also rescue sun bears, and in China we've rescued brown bears as well. But just to see them growing up from these frightened, depleted little things that you can see here on a bear bile farm, and confiscated thankfully by the authorities, and then suddenly getting the tender loving care, and as they grow up into hooligan bears, just owning China or Vietnam, they just are complete little delinquents, and it's our joy to be able to understand and learn from them as well. And Goldie didn't disappoint us, because what I want to show you here is another little video of the fact that once she'd been acclimatized to the enclosure, once she realized that all these toys were for her and her friends, now she's getting more curious and more inquisitive. And this little play toy that she's got, what she wanted to do, she didn't just want to grab what was inside this enrichment toy, but she wanted the whole toy for herself. And I want you to see what she does here. We call her our Mensa bear. So she's deliberately undoing that knot. Just look at what she's realizing she can do. She's pulling the knot away. She's unraveling it. And then once she's realized what she's done, she's no longer looking at the knot. She knows that she's got it clear. And now that prize is hers. So their intelligence is absolutely astonishing, which again is why it's a privilege to work with these guys. So coming full circle now, how are we ending bear farming in Vietnam? Well, two very clear points: to close the farms and rescue the bears to sanctuaries, and end that demand of bear bile, as the IUCN have spoken about. So we know now there's approximately 156 bears from surveys that have recently been carried out by the government authorities in Vietnam. We do not pay the farmers compensation because bear farming is illegal. So we don't compensate the farmers. And by the way, they are very, very rich. If you look on the right-hand picture here, you go into a local village and you see one of the poshest houses, that will inevitably belong to a bear bile farmer. So you can see on the map at the top of the picture there, in red, is where our bear sanctuary, our first bear sanctuary, is located. And then in the center of the map there is where our second bear sanctuary is located as well. So we have capacity already for about 400 bears at both of those sanctuaries. Our first sanctuary is absolutely full, and that's why we need to build the second sanctuary, which we're beginning to complete right now. But you might be surprised as well that the farmers are not our enemies. You know, if we start treating them as enemies, they, you know, even though bear farming is illegal in Vietnam, these guys, if they're criticized, they're just going to push back, and they're not going to release their bears as quickly as they should, because they're fearful of being embarrassed in front of the media, etc. So they just don't come forward with their bears. But if we start treating these farmers as people that are to be thanked for having the integrity of giving up their bears, then we find that they tell their friends, they tell their peers, and more farmers come to us saying that they're happy to give up their bears as well, because they know they're not going to get compensated anyway. But the interesting thing is, you can see these two pictures. So there's Tuan and our Heidi, our new Vietnam director there, both with the bear farmer and his wife. On the right-hand side picture is myself. These are not made up pictures with the bear farmers. This is also with Mr. Ha, the government official. These are people genuinely cooperative and wanting to work with Animals Asia. And when we had an event, I asked one bear bile farmer how he felt when, you know, he gave up his bears to us. And, you know, his reply, I put it here, I was so moved, so deeply moved when he said, "I feel released." So this is it. We've got 150 bears to go. We've got the second sanctuary that we've begun building again in the middle of the country. We've had COVID, we've had the poor economy, we've had wars around the world that have prevented people from supporting Animals Asia. And so this is our challenge now, is to, you know, seek the help of every single person that we can to help us provide funding to get this second sanctuary finished. We've already got the first phase done, and we've got 19 bears rescued now into this beautiful, beautiful sanctuary on the buffer zone of Bac Ma National Park. It's like Shangri-La. It's absolutely incredible. And there was our first bear, Armstrong, who was rescued a couple of years ago and is now out there with his friends in the enclosure. So the sense of urgency that we feel is intense, because, you know, obviously we've got the space now. We need to rescue those bears as quickly as we can, and we need to finish up building things like the education centre, the staff accommodation, you know, some more utilities, etc., to finally get this place finished, so that the Vietnam government continue keeping their word. And you might ask, well, why can't we rescue more bears, as we did in China, you know, with Little Rainbow? But the truth is that these bears are so hideously compromised as a result of the bear farming industry. I'm not going to go through all these, but, you know, some of these bears have one, two, or even all of these issues. When we receive them, we just look at them and we call them very often our broken bears. I haven't shown you the gruesome pictures, but believe you me, it's just, it brings us to our knees looking at animals that need so much physical and psychological help. And of course, at the end of the day, because they're drug dependent, they are in the majority unsuitable for releasing back into the wild. you know, and along the way we lose our bears. And I don't know of many other sanctuaries that have gardens of rest for their beloved bears, but we always have since day one, since we first began rescuing bears. We bury these animals when they come to the ends of their lives with their favorite toys, their favorite food. And we read a poem in Chinese, in Vietnam, in English. And we even, again, have people like the lovely Jane Goodall along to come and pay their respects to our beautiful bears at the end of their days too. Now, having just mentioned Jane, you'll remember that she got really, really excited when she discovered that her beloved chimpanzees used tools outside in the wild. So, for example, if they wanted to pick out the termites, they put sticks down and the termites would stick to the sticks, and then the chimpanzees could be eating the termites. And we're finding exactly the same with our bears, that they are doing things that we find extraordinary. You just saw beautiful Goldie, you know, unraveling his toy because he really wanted something inside that, both the toy and something inside that toy as well. And what we call here is cooperative collaboration. And this is Rafi, who wants to reach something high in the tree. But these trees are protected, so you can see the bamboo is stopping the bears from climbing some of them, but still he wants the browse, the juicy leaves at the top. And so what he's done is used his friend Jitesh as a step up, so as to provide that balance so he can reach that browse and pull it down. Um, we call it that illegal. They even have what we call illegal tree parties, where they actually destroy the bamboo. They move the bamboo away from the tree, pull it away, and then they climb up that tree. And there's nothing that we can do except laugh when they're having their illegal tree parties. But I want to show Kimmy as well, because you can see what she's using there. She knows she wants to get higher. She wants to get up that tree. This is a tree that she can climb, but she can't actually be bothered to do that. So she figures that she can use her paddling pool as a step up. And the browse is all hers. So it's all about understanding these bears, you know, just really getting into their heads about what they need, because they are such, as Elsa Polston said at the beginning of this presentation, they are such a complex species to understand. And you know, during the winter, this is our bears in China and Vietnam, where we just give them all the straw that they need, because they go, of course, into winter dormancy patterns. And they build what we call straw mountains. And again, because they are so individual like us, some of the bears, like Olivia, they like to build their nests high, that you can see there, so, as they would maybe high in trees. Others, like Marcia, they like to build their nests low, as they would in the trunks of trees, the lower trunks of trees. And Ozzy, I'm afraid, well, we're figuring out still what was he trying to do there. I'm afraid he didn't have much of a clue. That's the male of the species. No, that was a joke. I shouldn't be saying that. So, and Stanley, well, it has to be said, another male of the species. This is, we couldn't believe this. So these pictures are absolutely true, because what he did was bring in a paddling pool that he had in the outside enclosure. He brought it into his den, and then he proceeded to try to put it up into his hanging basket bed. You can see there all those 4 pictures, until finally success. He actually did it and was in that paddling pool for an afternoon snooze. I have no idea the comfort level that he got there, but he knew what he wanted to do and he achieved it. And Ozzy, let's go back to him, because actually he gave me a bit of a slap on the wrist, because what he really wanted to do was build his nest in the great outdoors that you can see there, and he achieved that as well. So coming nearly to the end of this. This is our old Tatsy. This is one of the bears that I first saw on another bear bar farm in 1993, and has been with us ever since. We think at 36 years of age, at least, Tatsy is not only the oldest moon bear that we've got at any one of our 3 sanctuaries, but is also the oldest moon bear in the world. He's just celebrated that 36th birthday. If you jump onto our website, you'll see we did a birthday cake celebration for him with an illegal cranberry cookie thrown in as well. So our bears, again, it's again just setting up to understand them. Like some of them, few of the females don't particularly like water. You don't often see them in the swimming pools. But what we found with a bear called Tuffy, as soon as we'd rescued him from this horrible cage, as soon as we'd put him into an enclosure and we put a paddling pool there, we knew that Tuffy was an absolute water baby. And then finally, when we introduced him to an enclosure with a huge, great pool in it, well, he went into a league of his own, and this video clip went viral of Tuffy enjoying his pool. Just be patient. And then until it all went horribly wrong. So just to finally end on, why the help of people like you is so important, because you allow our work to keep on keeping on, and you allow our staff, our team, to take these bears from the depths of hopelessness to where they are today in their grassy enclosures like Tuffy. And this is a beautiful bear that we called Dawn, that we rescued from a bear bar farm in Vietnam. And it was part of what we called the Every Minute Rescue in February 2023, where we rescued 5 bears who had been caged for 20 years of their life. That's over 7,000 days. If you want to figure out what you've been doing for the last 7,000 days while they were in the most dreadful, dreadful conditions, typically on a bear bar farm in Vietnam. So they had no free access to natural light. They had never felt the sun on the fur. They had never felt the rain on their bodies. They had no free access to food. They didn't even have free access to water. They had no medication to take away their pain. They had no straw to lie on against those unrelenting bars. And they had no friends or toys to play with. So they were in complete isolation for those 20 years of their life. We were particularly worried about all of them, but none more than Dawn, than you can see here. And when we got her back to our rescue centre, we became increasingly worried over the following days, because her mind was in such distraught turmoil. That's all I can say. Very often we can bring these bears round with tasty, nutritious food, with the medication to take away their pain, with banana leaves you can see there to lie on and make nests. But Dawn, in her head, she had established that no matter what happened to her, whether something good happened to her, whether she got, the food that she enjoyed, very, just around the corner, something terrible was going to happen to her life. That was what was in her head. And throughout this time, throughout these days, she was just pressing her head against the bars of the cage, or she would turn herself into a tight little ball, or she would weave backwards and forwards against the bars of the cage. Whatever we tried, whatever our team tried, progress was so slow with this psychologically damaged bear. We call this this learned helplessness. And that's what had happened to this poor distraught bear. And then over time, slowly, Dawn came through. I think what I found as well, what I realized too, and something that had really upset me was that when I looked at this bear, I realized that not only, was she not able to cope physically and psychologically, everything had been taken from her, but also her very identity. Remember, I told you that they're at the beginning that they're called moon bears because of that lovely yellow crescent of fur on their chest. Look at that. Dawn didn't even have the identity of a moon bear. But again, over the following weeks, she slowly responded to tender, loving care. And it was on this one occasion that I was in quarantine as she was recovering. They have to be in a quarantine cage for 30 days before they're released into a den. And that allows us to be able to observe them, be able to medicate them properly, be able to understand these bears more. They get more in that recovery cage than they ever got in the 20 years on the bear bile farm. And so when I came face to face with her again, I remembered I was going to take a picture. And as I was just about to take that pic, Dawn stopped eating that piece of pumpkin and she looked up at me as she held that pumpkin in her paws, as if to say, is this piece of pumpkin really for me? And I just remember losing it at that point and just thinking, oh my gosh. And that you can see her chest again with that very identity as a moon bear missing. So we promised her as a team that we would do everything that we could to make Dawn be bear. And you know what? We did it. Again, here's a little video of that process. And the reason I'm showing you this, because she was also pretty much naked when she came into us. But Dawn replaced learned hopelessness with learned happiness. And as you can see there, she slowly has started to recover her very identity. I was there the other week and counted 7 little blonde hairs on that naked chest of hers. So Dawn is Moon Bear. Whoops, sorry. And as I come to the end of the presentation, I also want to perhaps ask, I think there might be a burning question in your hearts. And that question might be, did you ever find out what happened to Rainbow? And it's my absolute joy to be able to tell you, yes, we did. In fact, a year later, we got the forestry officials in Pengzhou in Sichuan province. They sent us some footage from a camera trap that they put in the forest that picked up a little yearling bear, or actually a bear that was now 2 years of age, that was hopping around on 3 legs in the forest. And I want to show you, it's like seconds, it's like 10 seconds, but it was definitely Rainbow. Our little bear had been successfully returned home. So again, it's thanks to all of you for allowing me to make the presentation today, for the privilege again of working with these animals for ending bear bar farming in Vietnam now. And I wanted to tell you as well that the very last bear that comes through our gate at the end of next year will be given the name. He or she already has a name of Hong in memory of the bear that began it all and in honor of the bear that I left behind. So thanks very much, guys. And I guess I can take questions now.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much, Jill. What a marvelous presentation. So we will open the floor up for questions if anybody has any. Free up here?
Absolutely. I mean, I'm just moved actually by your presentation. I wanted to know, how are you financed? What's the money situation for you?
Thank you, Maria. By, public donation, we're not government funded at all. So we really have to do the hard graft there in terms of an amazing fundraising team that we have. One of the reasons why I'm coming out to your neck of the woods in the US in September, October, is to literally travel from the east to the west of the country to meet major donors and try and encourage, gifts that allow the sustainability of this program to go on.
Right. And the other question is, how many people are actually managing the sanctuaries? Because it seems like labor intensive to look after those uh, numbers as well. So how do you get people to work?
It's
And how many are they?
We have to pay, again, the majority of our staff on site at the sanctuaries in China and Vietnam are Chinese and Vietnamese. And so we have to pay them to keep them there, because obviously you need to build up that rapport, with the bears. They need to understand our carers need to understand the bears. So we've got over 70 on site in Vietnam, and we've got slightly more than that on site in China as well, just because of the different dynamics of the bear houses that we have. So, it's a lot of staff that we have to employ. But again, it's a privilege to be able to do that, because all the while we're embarking on capacity training programs with our local staff that shows the country, the significance of Chinese and Vietnamese citizens being able to perform such outstanding roles in the country of their birth to help endangered species in their countries.
That's incredible. And the last question was, you said that the bears that you have in the sanctuaries are not fit to be released. Is that the case for all of them, or are there some stories where they've recovered enough to be able to be released?
That a release isn't going to end bear farming. Ending bear farming is going to be just closing those farms and rescuing those bears in Vietnam as quickly as we can. But ultimately, we hope to be working with the Vietnam government, who definitely have expressed an interest in doing a pilot program for maybe a sort of a semi-captive wild release program. So we are definitely open to that. But again, Maria, remember that, these bears have a value on their heads, because we've got to get the buy-in from the local community that makes them realize that that bear farming or killing bears in the wild is illegal. So it's a huge amount of education programming out there as well. But we're certainly open to that with the Vietnam government, once we can finally get the job done of rescuing all those bears by the end of next year, and then figuring out if we can do a semi-wild release pilot program.
Thank you. That's been amazing.
Thank you.
Libby?
Yeah. Can the sanctuaries be used for tourism in any way? I mean, the bears are so entertaining. Is there a way, without being intrusive, that they
That's
could...
a really great question as well, Libby. Thank you so much. We are effectively a hospice, as you've rightly pointed out. We're not a zoo or a safari park. That these bears need careful care throughout their time, but they do become used to people. They do lose their fear of people, and so we do have open days at both sanctuaries where we can invite the public to come along and meet them. And excuse me. And of course, major donors as well. Excuse me. Major donors, of course, we invite at other times people that sustain us financially. We can bring them onto site to come along and enjoy the bears as well. So we are quite regularly open to the public under the mechanism of guided tours only.
That's great, because I mean, that is the most convincing way to show that this is a very significant project. What happens to the the bear farmers, and when they give up their bears, do they tend to go into alternative medicine, or what do they do with what was a farm? Are they doing just another enterprise?
Yeah, remember, as I said, they are so rich in Vietnam. They've got the biggest houses in the community, and they've already made their money. They generally have other businesses anyway. So, they can be, doing subsistence farming, or as I say, just other businesses. So when they give up, generally they're a cottage industry. There's farmers only have a few bears on their premises. Some even only have one or two. So, once they've given up their bears, it's not a huge loss for them in Vietnam. So in China, it's different. We have what we call super farms. But again, even with hundreds, if not thousands of bears on these super farms, the farmers are making a hell of a lot of money. So we're not too worried about, in China when we started rescuing the bears, in the 90s, we began paying compensation because we didn't want their livelihood to be affected by our actions. But I think today, even in China, it's quite different. And most of the farmers have made a lot of money by now. So we don't have, we want to bring them to the table to give up their bears, but we wouldn't be paying them compensation.
What is the penalty if they're caught?
Well, in China, the bear farming is still legal. That's one of our biggest problems now, in working to help the government in at least closing down the illegal farms for now. And hopefully with this production of biotransformed bile, you will see more and more farmers closing as a result of government intervention. But in Vietnam, there are penalties, both financial and imprisonment. So I think the financial is about $5,000 plus something like anything up to 5 years imprisonment.
Yeah, that's, I suppose, important, because probably the money isn't what is $5,000, but imprisonment is more serious.
Yeah. Any other questions? Well, Jill, I just would like to thank you again for a wonderful presentation, and really very moving and thoughtful. And we just look forward to hearing more from you. Please send us a list of where you'll be during your trip in the United States, and we'll see if we can get some support from you from other SWG members.
Bless you. Thank you so much, Barbara, and to all of you, Maria, all of you, for the privilege of being able to tell a little of our story. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.